Hello, Garrett, and congratulations on such a beautiful and powerful film.
Thank you.
First, maybe could you just tell us how it all started, how you met up with Fox Rich, and how you decided to make a film on a journey?
Yeah, so in 2016 now, I think, I had made a short film, OpDocs, with the New York Times OpDocs, which was 13 minutes long. And that film was about a woman who was my age, who was in the process of trying to decide how to move forward with her life without knowing really what her future was going to be with her partner, who was awaiting trial in a private prison for about a year and a half, 2 hours north of Louisiana. And what struck me was that even though there are 2.3 million people incarcerated in America, in the United States, many of the family members on the outside often face feelings of isolation and lack of support because of the stigma associated with being an incarcerated family. And so Lon, who was the central figure of that film, had very few people that she could go to in terms of just getting basic advice. And so I had initially conceived of that film as being more of a facilitation that could be intergenerational conversations between women about their situation, how they were all in very similar situations and were navigating that in different ways. And so I had contacted an organization called FLIC, Friends and Families of Louisiana's Incarcerated Children. And Gina Womack, who is the co-founder and director of that organization, picked up. And I'll never forget, I was at the grocery store and it was like really loud, and I was trying to explain to her what I was doing, what I was hoping to do. And she said, well, the first person you have to speak with is Fox Rich. And at that point, Fox, the family had gone through 19 years of Robert's incarceration. And so Fox is actually in several seconds of alone of this short film. And I felt, for me, it was really important to think about how the conversation of incarceration could be extended, how we could think about this issue from a feminist, Black, Southern perspective, and from the familial perspective, from the effects of incarceration as opposed to incarceration in and of itself, and the statistics and the numbers, which are equally as important, but I think need to be also coupled with what is the after effect of what is the ripple effect of these things. And so I see these really as two kind of sister films, even though one is a feature and one is a short, and both that are really in celebration of these women and the families that are holding it together, which is the reality of our country. It's mostly Black women that are bearing the brunt of this and that are holding the country intact, and their families. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And when did you come across, or when did kind of Fox give you all the kind of home video footage? When did that come in?
But it was actually right when I thought I was finished making the film. I remember saying to her, I'm gonna go now to the editing room, and I'll come back and show it to you when I think there's something worth seeing. And she handed me a bag of 19 years of material, about 100 hours that she herself had not seen since she shot it. And yeah, it was a complete revolutionizing of what I thought I was making, a total destruction of what I thought I was making, in the best way. It's sort of like the rising phoenix, it just coming out of the ashes. Like as a filmmaker, you think you have a specific vision for what you're doing, and then that's completely derailed, but in a way that I think fundamentally was so essential to making the film. And I really like to think of it as like spiritually, like both of us were making these films in these two different time periods, and they came together to make this sort of third film. There are even these moments I remember watching in the archive where Fox places the camera in almost exactly the same place that I had my camera when we were shooting years and years later. The profile of her at sitting at her desk, and there is a spiritual synergy between the footage that is almost unexplainable for me on some level.
And so she has been shooting all this kind of tapes for her husband, who I guess she couldn't pass them on to him while he was in prison, could she? It
No.
was just for him to see when he was going to be released. So she had never watched them at all until she gave them to you.
No, and neither had the sons, and obviously Robert himself hadn't. And yeah, so it's really it makes you think a lot about memory, I think, you know, and that you have, especially if you think about how the family is physically separated, even though they had visitation and there were phone calls. I think it's then to be able to put the images to the memories, to your own imagination from Robert's perspective, I think was a testament to Fox's lack of doubt, you know, and to her own character and commitment and the family's commitment.
Yeah, because I've been wondering about that, because obviously Fox is a force of nature, but she has a job. She's raising children mostly on her own. She has to fight for her husband's release, and also to film yourself through that is a massive commitment when you think about it. Do you think it was also a way to kind of keep control of her own narrative, you think, in a way?
Yes, I do. And Bell Hooks talks about this a lot in terms of like the role of the Black Family Archive, specifically in the context of America, where, you know, representation of us is often controlled and from the lens of outsiders, from others. And so really, it's important for us to build our own image making and be in control of our own image making. I think that is what Fox was doing, is I think she was contributing. I mean, it's ironic because the very thing that got them in trouble was also the thing that I think she was recreating in her own terms, which is the idea of the American dream and the idea of what wholesomeness is. They robbed a bank in pursuit of the American dream. And Fox, I think, in reclaiming her own narrative and in reclaiming her own family's identity, there was a pursuit in proving that they were a wholesome family, and that that they're a beautiful American family, and that is also how the archive, I think, is pushing that forward, you know, in her own voice and in their own voice.
And so I guess you must have been thinking about that a lot yourself when you were making the film, to how you were portraying her and never putting her in a kind of, even if it's harder for a woman like that, but as from a victim perspective, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I'm making films with people, and I don't think about the people I'm making films with as subjects, you know, that I really think to a certain extent it's a matter of understanding somebody well enough that I can anticipate the way in which they move through space, what their hopes and dreams are, what their fears are, what the things are that are blocking them from what they want, and allowing the form of the visuals, the actual formal structure of the film, to be a celebration and representation of their uniqueness. And I think that's where, for me, it's not about like trying to be on somebody's heels or being behind them at every moment, because I would like to think that I know where they're going, you know, so that my camera can be in one place and life can feel lived as it is for them. So we are with them, we're not behind them or looking at them. And so my approach in the representation of the family was an effort to allow it to be seen as it was, as much as possible. And I think fundamentally, when you're making documentaries, it's, you know, you don't want to make propaganda, right? That's not my job, but I do think that the most successful thing I could do was make something that at least the people I'm making a film with could not argue with, right? So it's not necessarily, and if they like it on top of that, that's the best.
And let's talk a bit about craft, because it's beautiful. So you said you had almost finished your film before Fox gave you the footage. Were you shooting in black and white then? You had decided to film in black and white anyway?
Yeah, I had, I mean, because in my mind, I was like, oh, this is an extension of a previous film that is in black and white, which was Alone. And Alone was in black and white because I was in the process of making another film called America, which was a silent black and white film. And I think I was like, honestly, from a really superficial level, I was not seeing in color. Like I really was just formally seeing things in black and white. It wasn't actually until Lon's son from Alone, who when he saw Alone, he was the one who made the connection of like, there's something really powerful about the lack of time, you know, the black and white allows us to always kind of be in this present moment. I think with time, there was just the superficial sort of approach to it initially, but then it also became really important when I started to incorporate the archive in ensuring that the film really felt like a river, that it really felt fluid and had a sort of linearity to it, despite the way in which we're moving through back and forth through time. And I also felt like the score that I wanted to use, Emma Hoy's music, which she had recorded in the 60s to raise money for an orphanage in Ethiopia. The music to a certain, the film couldn't hold music like that unless itself had a sort of uniformity to it. Otherwise it became a collage, a tapestry. And I wanted it to feel fluid, you know, so that the music could also be held in that.
And tell us a bit more about the music and who made the music.
Yeah, so Emma Hoy, which is how she goes by, she's a 96-year-old Ethiopian nun. She's still alive. And she was a prisoner of war. She was classically trained, Western classical music, but then also she came back to Ethiopia. And rather than pursuing or being a composer or I don't know, I was supposed to call it a music artist, but that's not the term for that kind of music back then. When she decided to become a nun, you know, she doesn't record her music. She just did it that one time in the 60s. And I mean, I think that there's something incredibly you can hear the blending of influence in the music itself. And I just thought that there was something that felt very New Orleans about that to a certain extent too. And I just loved the idea of bringing these two women, of bringing Fox and Emma Hoy together in space, you know, in this film. I think that there's a lot of overlaps, you know, in terms of their strength and their pursuits and the way they've moved through the world as artists, you know, and individuals. Yeah.
It works really well. And carrying on craft, maybe let's talk about the editing with your editor, Gabriel Rodes. And obviously it must have been an absolute Herculean and epic work to be going through the archive footage and what you had already found. And was Fox involved at all, or did she leave you to it entirely?
Yeah, no, I mean, thankfully she was very trusting of the process. You know, I mean, I kept her, I think we were editing 9 months total. So actually pretty short for everything that it was, you know. And I kept her updated on sort of where we were with things, what the timeline was. And, but it was important for me. And I think she understood that and trusted that I needed to get it into a certain place before I could show it to her. And knowing that she would see it and be able to weigh in before obviously it went to the world. And I think a lot of filmmakers, everyone is different in terms of how they approach those things. It was for me really important that she saw the film and that Robert saw the film. But the sons, actually, the boys didn't see it until the premiere night. And I think, you know, it's better said from them directly, but I think, you know, already seeing yourself in the past, right? Like just trying to connect the actual happenings versus the abstraction of memory in your mind is something, is definitely something. And I'm just glad that they felt that the film served the purpose and honored them and their story in a way that they felt agreeable to. You know, that's the most that I could ask, really. And that it furthered their own cause and the things that they felt were important in the world.
And obviously from your background and everything you've said, it was, I imagine you always wanted to do a very kind of personal film about Fox, but the film is also co-produced by the New York Times and Concordia. Was there ever some kind of suggestion of it to be more of a journalistic type of film? Because that could have been the kind of the angle as well.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I have to say that, so with Alone, it started off with OpDocs, and I think I've been incredibly fortunate to work with people who really took a chance on me, who didn't know me or my work really that well, and really let me direct and to have a vision. And Davis Guggenheim, who heads Concordia, is very, I mean, I think he really understood what it means to support filmmakers, which is to let them also have a voice. You have to do that, otherwise there's no point. Of course, then, though, to be honest, if I'm being fair, like, there's always questions about, well, how clear is this? How do we think about factual information? Do we want to use text or title cards to explain things? And for me, I feel very strongly that sometimes images and the way that things make us feel last longer than words themselves or text or what we consider facts. And so it was up to me to prove that we didn't need that. It was up to Gabe and I both to make a case for how we could push the film in a way that we could allow people to feel safe in the facts and the information, but also get into what was frankly more important, which was how things make us feel.
And are you still in touch with Fox?
Oh yeah, very in touch. Yeah, I mean, I think part of the beauty too, I mean, our distributor Amazon has been incredibly supportive in allowing Fox and myself and the whole film team to really be involved in how the film is released and brought into the world. And I personally think it's kind of critical, if you are working with people, real people whose real lives are being rendered on screen, that they be a part of the conversation in terms of how it comes out. So we're every week talking about something, and they're doing really well. So yeah.
Great. And then you got the Best Director award at Sundance, which is amazing. How was that?
Honestly, I've been too mortified to go back and watch that video. I think I just like lost my words, and I mean, it's when you win an award, the Best Director, it's like there's so many people that go into the making of a film, and it's this idea of an auteur is very is rooted in, I think, colonial patriarchal perspectives of how things get made, and so it's an honor, but it's clearly an effort of the family and the many and our editor and our producers and the studios and many other people. So it's a group celebration, for all of us. Yeah.
So you've got an exhibition coming up at MoMA in New York in October. It must feel great to have something physical happening again after all this time in lockdown.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's physical also just in terms of the work itself being physical. And that is, it's kind of like when they say you should exercise multiple muscles, like it's not good to just do one muscle. And I think, that show, which is in tandem with the Studio Museum in Harlem, and is curated by Thelma Golden, who's the director there, and Legacy Russell and Thomas Lax and Laka Tattersall at MoMA. I mean, I'm working with amazing people, and it's really great to that project actually started off as an installation, thinking about it as a physical body of work of something that people can move through, because it's dealing with a visual chronology of history in America, starting in 1915 through 1926. And so I think for me as a filmmaker, when you're working a lot in two-dimensional space and you have to tell stories one frame at a time, there's something that's been incredibly exciting and intuitive for me to think about how to work around that in a very literal way. So I'm really excited for the show for that reason, and just for the amazing people, the amazing team that I have the privilege of working with. So I hope everyone can come and see that. Come to New York.
Yeah, that'd be great. Great. But Garrett, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure. I so appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.